What's good, everybody? It's your boy Big Nate. Welcome back to Big Nate's Reading Club, Big Nate's live stream, home of the best live streams, as we already know. And whoa, we in a bit of a different situation, aren't we? What's going on? This looks like a different scene. Your boy's in Denver. Your boy moved. So, as you can see, this is here. Actually, well, I'll wait till some people come in. Let me make sure I got my technical stuff figured out. As always, it's a bit of a struggle. You guys know how it goes. But yeah, today we gonna be doing the same old, same old. And by that I mean we're gonna be watching. I think we can do some videos. I'm open to what you guys want to do, but I figure a good place to start would be with the David Foster Wallace interview. So let me make sure. Actually, can I just check that I'm like even? Will I see myself? I do. All right, cool. Colt, yellow. What's up? Plugging in my standing desk. I'm a little too high for my liking. But alrighty. Dope. We live. But yeah, like I said, we got a new location because I have just moved to, like I said, I'm in Colorado these days. Yeah, exactly. Yep, we have moved. Think my mic is good, by the way. Yep. So we still getting everything set up, but yeah, we are. I don't know if you guys can. Got the bookshelf. We might actually replace this whole thing with a whiteboard, as you can see, and then we got this. I think this might be a little sneak peek of the new filming location, but let me not get ahead of myself. But yeah, that's the plan. We're gonna watch some videos. I wasn't able to. Last few weeks have been busy. Let me tell you. So I haven't done a full, been able to like really commit myself to a text. Oh, hold on. I wanted to. I'm sipping on my tea, so I'm finding something to set the bag. You know how it goes. All right, but yeah, I mean, you guys know what to do. We finna just ball out, watch some videos, have some dope intellectual discussion. I mean, that's what the Big Nate's live stream's all about, isn't it? So I got my tea. So yeah, I guess if whoever's watching right now, we could talk about what you're reading while I set up. Oh yeah, screen share is working good. I know we left off at 57 minutes approximately, so we're gonna pick right back. Eventually, we will get through the David Foster Wallace. Here, let me even say, today we continue the DFW interview saga, just so people know. Oh, is that my dog? Hold up. Or did it just hold on? My door just opened. Nope. He's lounging. All right, cool. And then I figure anyway. So what are we reading? I currently am reading. Let's see. Cool. Been reading the Inquisitor's Manual by Antonio Lobo Antunes. I'm really curious if you know about this book. The writing style is very cool. I have never heard of it. Let's the Inquisitor's Manual, Antonio. No, never heard of it. This looks cool though. Oh, I just said like a Portuguese version of As I Lay Dying. Okay, but more ambitious. They said more ambitious. Have you read As I Lay Dying, Cool Colt? Just curious, because I quite enjoyed that book. And the Portuguese literature. I mean, I can't even say that. I've literally read only one book, Blindness by Jose Saramago. I don't know if you're familiar with that as well. But that was a fantastic book in my opinion. But cool, this looks sick. For sure. But nice, and you've been enjoying it, you say? You say the writing style is cool, so. Well, while people are typing or whatnot, I'm reading, of course, Moby Dick and same books. Just get used to, like I said, get used to it. I think everyone is used to it. The writing is on a different level. It's more maximalist. Okay, nice. We love maximalism, as we see here on the screen. But nice, that's cool. I mean, yeah, it must be pretty low key. I mean, not that I'm like an arbiter of that, but yeah, I haven't heard of that at all. And just on the Amazon, it didn't look like it had a ton of reviews. But of course, that has nothing to do with anything with the quality of writing. I'm just saying I've never heard that book. So Yeah, keep us posted, cool Colt. Have you just started it? Or are you pretty into it? Because, a lot of books, I'd be jumping the gun. That's why I've learned to, like, I'll be posting on Goodreads or I'll post on Discord, like, damn, I'm, like, loving this book. I'm fucking with it. A lot of books suffer from that, I want to say trope. I don't know what the actual word is. Just that pitfall of they start out super strong and then they just taper, taper, taper. So you know how it goes. But yeah, no, that's cool. That's good to hear. So keep us posted. Like I said, I'm adjusting my standing desk right now. I kind of like this. Some thereabouts. Okay, it's eye level. About halfway through it, just tried a bit of Sheen. Yeah, wait, hold on. Is that how you spell his name? What's up? Shogun, right? Chi. Is that how, oh, James. I always get these fucking confused. Who did? What's. Oh, okay, China Mel. I thought he had a name like that. Okay. Wait, who? I always get these confused. Oh, he's British? I think because his name is China, I assumed it was something like that, but, let's see. Oh, Perdido Street Station, that's the one I keep hearing about. Yeah. I think, he's a fan favorite in the Discord. I think people have, like his books a lot. But all right, cool. Yeah. Oh, nice. I'm seeing weird fiction. I'm all about my weird fiction, or just I love that. So okay, cool. All right. Well, here I think we can get to business. Like, oh well, let me finish talking about what I've been reading. Moby Dick and Rise and Fall. Like I said, I haven't been able to, especially it's only been 2 weeks, and those 2 weeks were jam packed with packing. So, nothing crazy, but Moby Dick continues to. It's funny. It's like so far, it's when it gets hot, it's really hot. But I feel like there's these moments. I mean, I kind of knew this going into it. This is one of the things that Moby Dick is associated with, almost. But like, there are these moments where I just feel like it loses so much momentum because he'll just go on tangents, and I love tangents. Of course, I love a good tangent, but they're like boring tangents. It's just like weird whale history, which I mean, to be fair, in his defense, like as far as like kind of boringish whale history goes, he makes it interesting. And like one of the examples actually was there was a chapter just like so because Moby Dick is the white whale. That's kind of his distinctive feature, and it was like this whole. And again, it's starting to heat up. We're getting some interesting stuff, and then there's like a 7+ page ass detour on just like the color white, which okay, this might not be the best example because it ended up being pretty cool, but the point is like I'm really loving when like it's especially like the story and the narrative and like the higher level philosophical stuff, but there are these like just detours which can just I feel like they take away the momentum. But even that, because like I said, it's like 7 pages of just like about the color white, which again I'm going back and forth because at first I started, I'm like, bro, why are we doing this? But it ended up actually, and the end of that chapter was like super strong, fire, banger. And the idea, I mean, like he starts talking about like white is normally associated, like symbolically that color is supposed to be associated with like purity and innocence and nobility and angels and all this good stuff. But it's like when you have creatures that are white, like especially things like the polar bear or the great white shark, it's almost like the contrast between it makes it disturbing and uncanny. You have something that's supposed to be like a nice, pure, beautiful color, but then you impose it onto something like in this case Moby Dick the whale, like this jagged, like cleft lip ass, kind of it's the vibe I get is like a grotesque whale. We haven't seen it yet, just kind of like through legend and whatnot, but anyway, it's almost like that actually makes something even more uncanny and horrible is because it's white in this interesting way. So I don't know. I like where he goes sometimes, but sometimes the tangents are just like, bro, let's get back because I love the story, But then we go on a 7-page thing about like the history and satology of whales, and it's like, ugh. But what do you think of the idea of Moby Dick being American canon? Couple things. I mean, so for one, I actually for some reason I thought Herman Melville was like British. I didn't think he was American. Like for just before this book, but I this book actually strikes me very much as American. Like as I began reading it, because it's taking place in the the OG America, like there's colonies and shit, like Nantucket, and like it was super puritanical, like like literally Puritans, and that's where I think some of the I language and I'm doing a bad job of explaining it, but it's like a lot of, I think from what I'm kind of gathering, a lot of the language of like sailors almost, it seems like comes from the puritanical stuff, or like what say ye and stuff like that. I don't know if that's, well, anyway, besides the point, as to the question, being American canon, the point is, it is strikes me as extremely American. Like that's something I noticed instantly from the beginning of the book, and I think I'm too soon to tell. But I think surely it's gonna end up. I mean, just from the lore around it, and like it just seems like anybody who touches this book ends up really loving it. And because of the themes of like literally America, like the different colonies and traveling across the different colonies and whatnot, I think the American aspect seems to be a real part of the story. So yeah, I don't know, a little too soon for me to tell, but I mean, the fact is, I think if you were to just ask me, Moby Dick is American canon for sure. Especially too because it ends up informing people, like not that this is an argument for it being in the canon necessarily, but it makes sense because like the modern American canon, you would think of someone like Cormac McCarthy for sure, and he is of course heavily influenced by Moby Dick and similar themes and ideas and just all that stuff. So I'm gonna say yes. But like it is a little too soon for me to tell. But all right, enough small talk. Let's get straight down to business. I'll back up a little bit. This was, I think, like the exact timestamp. But this is the interview that just keeps on giving. We are going to milk this cow until she's dry. It was weird, but yeah. We finna just play and just see what comes to mind. I forgot I need these things. Or else it's going to echo. But yeah, so far really enjoying. And then I forgot to mention Rise and Fall of Third Reich. Hitler's still on his bullshit, you know what I'm saying? Hitler is still on his bullshit. Trying to avoid getting France and Britain in the war, but it's over a little too late. They're trying to get them out, basically, and the propaganda is insane. That's all I gotta say. Like one of the most interesting things that just happened is, he's literally trying to spin. He's like trying to kind of negotiate a little bit with Britain and France. And he's like, let me remind you, you guys declared war on us, and we gave you all these opportunities. Basically, just totally spinning it. Like, they declared war on them, on Germany, because, of course, Hitler's maniacal-ass geopolitical behavior. And, anyway, I'm not going to get into it, but it's just a recurring theme. It's amazing, this man's ability to spin shit. Cool. It may be up your alley. There's a book on Moby Dick by Jungian analyst Edward Edinger called Melville's Moby Dick. I don't even think he was in denial. I think he was just actively like a manipulator and carrot, because he's constantly taught, like, throughout this whole campaign of his, the political aspect of it, the propaganda aspect. There's like the military, there's the economic, and he has a whole part where he's focused purely just on manipulating public opinion. And like going so far as to stage and orchestrate events so that they can they want to invade Poland. So what they did is they had like these concentration camp members basically dress up in Polish uniforms, commit this whole thing, which was going to act as a pretext for Germany to come in and invade Poland. Like, oh, you guys instigated the aggression, whereas this whole thing was documented and was completely a fabrication by the Nazi party. So just it's shit like that all the time. I don't think he was in denial at all. I think he was using it as a tactic. I mean, in some sense, he probably isn't. In some sense, he probably actually does believe that, just because he's just such an insane person. You tell yourself the lie long enough, you start to believe it. But and yeah, that book about Moby Dick sounds interesting. I mean, I think it's super gonna be up the alley for psychoanalytic interpretation for sure. Already it's straying on that, and I'm still super early into the book. I'm probably like a third in, and I think it just ramps up more and more. And somebody actually I totally forget who it was, but somebody posted a in the quotes channel something by Moby Dick, and it was honest. It reminded me basically of the unconscious and the dynamics of the psychological dynamics of the unconscious. And I read that and I was like, holy shit, if this is in Moby Dick, I need to read Moby Dick. And just like, even just with like some of the stuff that's been happening lately, in the book, I've been taking to I'm working on an essay right now actually about dreams and the unconscious, and just in describing the unconscious, I found myself I've already quoted Moby Dick multiple times, so yeah, totally see it being analyzable up the ass. And no, I did not get the version with illustrations. I have I don't know what I have. It's in the other room, so I ain't gonna get it. But Penguin, it's not like a normal black Penguin classic, but for some reason I think it is. But all right. With all that preamble out the way, we finna get right into it. So let's see. I'm sure we can just pick up where we left off. Let's see what David Foster Wallace has to say about whatever it is he was saying. Let's get it.
I think I made this word up.
How interesting. See, mine stopped here.
Really?
Yeah, there wasn't any of this stuff.
Oh my God.
No, it's fine. So it'll all be stuff. So we're talking about like the marketing of writing stuff.
No, but I mean, it's the fear of the writer that his work and his persona are somehow made into a banner, not only by promoting. Yeah, well, it belongs to promoting.
The work and his persona are the same thing.
No.
But they're both made.
Yeah, but as when you.
This interview, I guess it is like the unedited, but there are some hiccups. I think we talked about this last time, but it's just kind of funny to see.
When you are out there for the media, and what happens then?
I see a paradox here. I'm going to talk about the difficulties of having to deal with the media, but I'm talking to the media.
Sure.
Right. See, I'll pretend I'm talking to you, but when
First off, I swear to God, I just heard that sound guy ass motherfucker laughing in the background. If you listen closely, you can hear it. But I think this is here. Let me just play this in.
here. I'm going to talk about the difficulties of having to deal with the media, but I'm talking to the media.
Sure.
Right.
I hear
I'll
you, sound
pretend
guy.
I'm talking
You're
to
not
you, but
slick.
when the shows, you're going to have this face, sweaty face, on camera, talking about how difficult it is as a writer to be on camera. In which case, if I were the viewer, I would go, so why is the son of a bitch on camera?
And I think this is something that comes out in, I want to say it was the E Unibus Plurum essay. It might just be something he just talks about generally. But even, because, Dave Foster Wallace likes to go meta. And I do remember a part of his kind of shtick, his idea was that it's like, to take the example of the E Unibus Plurum essay, he's criticizing TV essentially and mainstream media, but within the context of media. So how do you do that? There's like two options. It's like one, I'm trying to remember exactly how he formulates it, but it's like you use the medium as a way to actually, at this meta level, criticize the medium itself, or in fact, I think he's about to talk about it. I might be deja vuing this, but it's like, or the people who, need to, like, you could go outside of that medium to, if he's talking about like TV or something, you could talk about it just like at a higher level as like an author, but the type of people who are consuming that ones aren't the audience you're trying to reach in the first place. I kind of butchered that, but let's just see where it goes.
So how do you suggest I handle this?
Yeah, no, it's a paradox, but at the same time, I think it's very, it's a legitimate fear to have. So I think about these things all the time. I think, well, I like literature, but at the same time, why am I doing this, and how am I doing this, and how can I try to preserve these things? So, it's a paradox for me too. So for this reason, I think it's something you can think about.
Sure. Well, there are a number.
See,
of
this is the thing too. I'm kind of confused what the question is. You know what I mean? I feel like to have like a good interview, it's like you gotta pose a direct question, let it be open ended, let it be a good one. But I feel like it was a little bit of just like word vomit, and it's like, so what do you think? You know what I'm saying?
There in the United States, there's another division between corporate publishers and nonprofit publishers, who are often very small and do a lot of poetry and avant-garde fiction.
That's already. Let's hear it.
If you are lucky, these are scare quotes. If you are lucky enough to be published by a corporate publisher, you get more exposure. You get reviewed in the New York Times instead of just in your local paper. You get translated into other languages and but literary stuff loses money for corporate publishers almost all the time.
Yeah, okay.
And
So I'll
one
let
of
him
the
finish
ways
his
they try
thought,
to
but
keep from losing money is marketing the stuff. And for reasons that everyone has tried to explain to me, but I still don't understand it, having the author go around and talk and read, the thing they most like to do is send you to a bookstore. And you give a reading at a bookstore, and there's maybe 200 people there. But while you're in town to do the reading for the bookstore, you talk to the local newspaper, and you maybe do something like this. And then
okay, so just before we move on from that point, I like this idea of the corporate publisher and then like the otherwise like independent, we'll say nonprofit, but just like we'll say a more independent publisher. And this is, I wonder if I mean, it surely has to contribute to like what seems like some kind of overall degradation of like the quality of literature in modern day. And I always am a little critical of myself there. Just I feel like this has been a problem since time immemorial. I don't know if it's really specific for us now, but we've talked about just the way in which like I don't want to say like capitalism, but I'll say capitalism, commodification. We could also say like the TikTokification, like this. There is a certain type of book, I think, that is sellable, especially like in this day and age. And I guess if you had to take the fully corporate, what's going to make the most profit, it's like the kind of books that would go viral on social media, the books that are maybe relatively lowbrow entertainment-y kind of stuff. Like this is, just for lack of a better word, I feel like the TikTok class of books would be something that would be a corporate publisher would kind of have a preference for. Like he just said, the more literary, genuinely good, which is usually associated in some way with like there being some kind of genuine challenge to it, whether it be kind of like intellectual or just like the vocabulary and the lexile, or whether it's thematically challenging, or basically something that has to make you think at some level, something that requires a little bit of effort on your part. I think it just is a fact that generally, by and large, that's not the type of stuff that's going to sell. The type of stuff that's going to sell is going to be the stuff that's easy, widely consumable, kind of fun, entertaining, and will just overall reach a wider audience. And, that's all fine and good. I think as a general principle that makes sense. But in the world of books, like if you're a publisher, you could obviously see, and the people who are buying books, like if you're somebody who's like starting to get into reading, you just go to your local bookstore. What that bookstore is filled with is going to be essentially all the main publishers. Like you might have some on the fringe, some kind of independent publishers who have deals with bookstores or whatnot. But like the big publishing houses, Penguin, Simon and Schuster, which actually got bought up by I don't even know who, but like who I don't know off the top of my head, but like there's like there's the main corporate publishing house, which even just in my lifetime, but just like since I even started paying attention to this, you can see more. It's the same thing that's happening just all across. I guess like I want to. It seems weird, but I want to say the economy. But like literally, you can just watch. There's all these different publishers which just get subsumed into bigger and bigger corporations. And then what happens is especially if you have like this stereotypical like CEO figure who's totally detached from the product. Like I can imagine a CEO of a publisher basically having no interest in reading. They got put in there to make money, to make profit, right? If that becomes your incentive as a publishing house, well then the quality of you're going to have less and less of that literary, more potentially challenging, reaching less of an audience, but the genuinely good stuff, the genuinely literary, transformative, meaningful kind of literature, that's going to get more and more phased out, and it's going to be this sort of positive feedback loop, I feel like, where you're just getting kind of lower and lower brow fiction or just literature in general, until eventually that kind of stuff is totally phased out. And it's like, okay, but there's still room for the independent publishers, right? Because they can still be kind of the bedrock of kind of serious literature. But as we see in every other industry, whether it be like grocery stores, whether it be like streaming outlets, whether it be like, just anything really. It's just the name of the game in modern society, as it seems to me, is that, the rich get richer, the bigger corporations get bigger and bigger, and all the independent ones become harder and harder to sustain. They just dry up like puddles. And in this case, the publisher is the medium through which, people get their literature. Or no publisher, no literature, really. You know what I mean? And so I think the way in which like these publishers operate is critical. Like that determines the literature landscape, which is so important in an already like extremely dwindling interest in this kind of stuff anyway. So anyway, that was a bit of a tangent there, but yeah, cool. Airport fiction and business psychology, exactly. That's the that's the type of stuff that's. I mean, but yeah, that's exactly right. The airport fiction is a great way to, because that's the stuff that's like very immediately consumable. You can just kind of pick it up, you can read through. Those are the types of books you can just mindlessly kind of read on an airplane in like a few hours and actually finish it. You ain't doing that for Moby Dick, for instance. And it doesn't have to be like, you don't have to jump straight into like the highest literature in the the canon, in the world canon. But obviously, when you have if you have more and more of a preference, right, if you as a corporate publisher are just finding, oh, these shitty little books aren't selling, the shitty little books being like the real challenging meaningful literature, then it's just there's no incentive for you, right? If the only thing you care about is profit, then there's just gonna be that stuff is gonna get phased out until it's more and more, perhaps exclusively, like Cool Quote says, airport fiction and business psychology. And so, to go back to what David Foster Wallace, he's talking about marketing campaigns and
It
whatnot.
generates like free advertising for the book. My problems with it are the following. My stuff I don't feel like is meant to be read out loud. There isn't really. It's not supposed to live on the breath. There isn't enough punctuation in it. And I don't feel like I read it out loud very well, A. And B, I find most when there's a question and answer like you and I are having, although you and I are having a much more lengthy one, but particularly one with like a newspaper reporter or a question and answer at the end of a reading. If the question is easy to answer if it's dull or stupid. The good questions are questions that can't be answered in a Q&A format, right? They're ones what you would have to sit down with a pot of tea or a pot of coffee, and they're things that could be answered only in conversation between two people. And so I always feel vaguely fraudulent, or there's a thing about doing this where you're helping me. We're pretending we're having a conversation.
Well, okay, so a pause right there before he goes on. I think what he just said, right, the questions that can be easily answered, the questions that can be in a newspaper interview-like style are the dull ones. They're the easy ones to answer. And I think that same principle is what we were just talking about. You can apply that to literature, right? The literature that's easily sellable, like highly commodifiable, right? Things that can be bought en masse. It's the stuff that is, in his own words, dull and relatively uninteresting. This is really like a perfect analogy here, because he's talking about, if you want to talk about real questions, if you wanted to get into like the real meaningful shit, you can't do that in a quick Q&A. You have to, as he says, get a cup of tea, get a cup of coffee. You have to have a real genuine discussion, and that's the type of stuff that, right, you would never imagine something like that being broadcast on like mainstream television. It just wouldn't sell, right? It's the same principle of like it wouldn't sell. So I think what he just said there is touching exactly upon the problem of potentially something that's going on with like the publishers, right? The things that sell easy, dull, lowbrow, and the things that are like to have a good, genuine conversation that's more challenging, that's more in depth, takes time, takes more effort. And then the analogous thing is like that's this kind of serious literature which is getting less and less attention these days, in the corporate publishing. Bard Sonic, I love how he undercuts the media establishment. Yes, again, it kind of within the media establishment too, right? That's kind of what he was just talking about, because this is all taking place kind of in an interview. What's kind of funny too is, as he's saying, we've consistently talked about how David Foster Wallace is, kind of meta. He's talking like when he is doing the sort of journalistic discussion of like whatever event it is he's covering, he's constantly giving footnotes talking about like the actual assignment itself and his actual kind of experience, doing this whole thing. Right now he was just talking about the media, and in this interview he's doing that. He's calling it out specifically, he's like, right now, you and me, interviewer, we're doing this, right? We're pretending we're helping each other. You asking me questions, I'm asking you questions. And then he takes it at that higher level and critiques like the overall thing. So he's been the message he's been talking about is, like you said, the media establishment undercutting it. But I think it's significant that he's doing it here, and then as he's like literally saying he's pointing it out. He's going meta as DFW is ought to do.
There's a thing about doing this where you're helping me. We're pretending we're having a conversation, and I'm also pretending that there aren't cameras all over here.
Like you said, Bart Sonic, right to their face.
In fact, this is all on TV, and I know that I'm supposed to ignore. Like, I'm not supposed to look at the camera because that doesn't make for a good interview. But trust me, when I'm sitting here, the camera is the thing I really see.
Oh my God, you're right. He's caught. This is perfect time. He's calling the whole thing out. Like, even giving you his own the interview as we are even just being presented it. It's exactly like he's saying, question, answer. It's perfectly framed. We don't see it, like him even just saying that kind of gives you almost a vision of like, you can imagine the boombox, and because the fucking sound guy sucks, like we've talked about, we're literally seeing that. And this is the unedited version, so that's the only reason why. But you can just imagine all this stuff in the fraudulentness of it, like he says, right? The kind of phoniness. And I love that he's doing this, of course, within the medium, but kind of coming outside of it, or at least taking a step outside to point it out, right? That's the meta aspect. And I think that's something characteristic of all his writing. And all of this, of course, is ironic in some sense, right? It's supposed to just be like this one-on-one, nice, clean cut frame, but the irony is that's not what he's seeing at all. And then pointing it out, I think, just further advances that idea. But yeah, no, it's brilliant.
It's all very strange. And so why do I do it at all? I make a variety of deals, and I do a few things. I know some writers who like this, and there are things about it that are, it's very flattering. You guys came. It makes me nervous, and it makes me self-conscious to try to talk about stuff that I find almost impossible to talk about, or else just to go, so how long are you in town? Oh, 3 days, But I have an agent whom I owe 25,000 favors to, who's done all these nice things, and it's also exciting for a writer to get his work published in another country. So she says.
Well, this is what's interesting too. It's like I'm a little torn about this because I think he's right. He's almost pointing out this whole interview tour and the interview cycle. It's almost like what comes to mind for me is like with music, somebody goes on an album cycle, so they'll have this essentially a whole marketing campaign, and then like what do you know, then they drop their album, that kind of thing. But the kind of phoniness of it, and he's introverted. He said he does not like doing this. He's essentially doing it out of an obligation. It sounds like he has a personal relationship with his agent, like again at an actual personal level. But whether or not that was true, any kind of tie to the corporate publishing, I think on average you would be doing something like this. But so and again, there's the critique. But I also love this because David Foster Wallace seems like somebody who would never have done this interview of his own volition. But just look at how insightful this is. I know he keeps saying he's not being insightful, but he clearly and obviously is. So on the one hand, I'm very glad he did. It's almost, when writers say like their intention was to burn their work, and then the person totally flouts it and doesn't burn their work and actually publishes it to the whole world. It's like on the one hand, dang, the author didn't want you to do that, but on the other hand, damn, I'm so glad you did, because here we get these gems. So,
this German publisher is really good, and they're going to publish the book well, even though I don't think my English can really be translated into German, because it's very idiomatic.
Say more.
They're going to publish the great advertisement. I'm sure the public. And all they need is this. They need this one thing from you to help them sell enough books, maybe so that they don't lose money on it. It then becomes very difficult to say no. On the other hand, I don't think it's very good. I don't think it's good. Maybe a show like this, there's no analog for this in the U.S. But the whole going around and reading in bookstores thing, it's turning writers into kind of penny ante or cheap versions of celebrities. People aren't usually coming out to hear you read. They're coming out to sort of see what you look like and see whether your voice matches the voice that's in their head when they read. And none of it's important.
It seems like a commodification. It's like you're no longer treating like the artist's intentions and what they want to do with the book and how they want to surround it with respect to even something like marketing, but rather it's like, they are a vessel. Like you go, it's like he says, it's all well and good to do readings and everything like that, but what it comes down to, the real reason behind it is it becomes advertising. So the artist basically gets flouted around. You go here, there's a scheduled itinerary, you're there for a few days. Like he says, it's like there's a lot of like kind of small talk, how long are you in town? Oh, I'm here for, blah blah blah. But again, the commodification of the artist, like just treating them as a means to an end in some certain sense. Bard Sonic, I feel like DFW is having trouble separating the abstract truth of his ideas with the human, the individual sitting across from him, though. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Yep. And also the fact that it's, again, well, just related to what I was just saying, I think he would be horrified to have found out that his unedited interview was published. Again, we're getting so much out of it, but throughout this whole thing, when we first started, he was just like none of this is gonna be published, right? None of this is gonna be published, right? And he's kind of like fumbling over his words a little bit, presumably because he thinks it's all gonna get edited out. But I like what he's saying here. It's like, whether or not it's, because I think what David Foster Wallace here is saying is like, my words, the words on the page were not meant to be spoken, right? There's not enough punctuation. It's maximalist. It's not something that's actually supposed to be read out loud. And that's the author's intention here, right? But despite all that, and then not to mention the kind of separate fact, the more very much cosmetic, superficial level of what do they look like? What's this, just basically almost like gossipy kind of stuff. Like, does this, as he says, does this person match the image I had in my head? You're not there actually kind of for a meaningful engagement with the text itself. That's at least what he's saying. All of this is be ultimately for like as a service to the kind of corporate publishing and this advertising, but all of this is counter to the author's intentions. Like, I think it's interesting to sit, like, I think you could totally imagine, and DFW here is explicitly saying, I did not intend, my work is not meant to be read out loud, but because of all his obligations, professional and otherwise, he ends up doing it even though he doesn't like it. And especially this whole kind of fake charade of we're going on tours, we're doing these interviews, all of this is against the artist's intention and will, which is, I think, what he's just kind of saying is a little bit yucky. And there's no way out of it, really, I think, the way he's describing like the way that corporate publishing works. But it's an interesting idea.
It's icky.
Oh, icky! Wow, I said yucky. Close enough, right?
Fishing for icky, but in terms of banal, I don't know. Banal to me means general and simplistic and superficial and vapid and if you do work like this, you pay certain prices. You don't make as much money. Not as many people read your stuff, but the people who are reading it and are interested in it, you're pretty sure. Like, the thing that I like about doing this kind of stuff is that I'm pretty sure my readers are about as smart as I am. I think if you're somebody like Crichton or
I don't know about that.
Somebody who's like a Harvard MD, but you're writing for a mass audience, things get very strange. I don't worry that people who are reading my stuff are misunderstanding it or banalizing it any more than it's already banal. I do worry, weirdly, about when it's translated into languages that I don't know. I worry that
I
don't know what's in there. I don't know. There are so many American idioms in there that I don't know whether they can be translated or not.
Yeah, David Foster Wallace too, especially because it is so like American and, like he says, idiomatic. It's like, I think I'm sure I've said this on the channel before, and I'm probably going to keep saying it, but I love this quote from Don Quixote where it's like reading a translation of a work is like seeing a tapestry from the other side. Seeing it from literally just from the behind. You're not seeing the purity of the actual pattern itself. You're seeing it through some kind of filter and it gets distorted. You're not seeing it in its fullness of color and design and brilliance. And I think, DFW seems like the type of writing I think that would really, not transfer. So That's just an interesting idea. It's an interesting idea. But I do always kind of hate that, like, when I read something like Don Quixote, and there's all, or even like Leo Tolstoy or Dostoevsky, anything like that, there's always these these translator comments that say either kind of like, oftentimes it's something like, this was actually like a really funny play on words, you didn't get it because the words don't make any sense, but they'll try and kind of explain it, sometimes they just outright explicitly say, there is no way, like, what Tolstoy is doing here is such and such and such, there is no way to express this in English, there's no word, there's no phrase to describe this. So sometimes they kind of like, you don't get to experience the full reading of it as it was meant to be conceived in its original language, and there's all this stuff that goes over your head, and who knows the little minor subtleties that you're missing that just weren't talked about in the footnotes. But sometimes they just explicitly say there is no analog here, and that always interests me about translations. It's like, I used to think it's like, what do you mean, like, there's a word, it has a meaning, and there's got to be some corresponding word meaning. But the more I learned about it, it's like, no, there really are things that just cannot be, that just don't transfer. And just a funny little thing about language. Well, and he's talking about his own work being translated. And I mean, from like what I've read, I could totally see that being an issue. So, but yeah.
Well, it's very hard to translate it, actually. But the people who did it and who translated your work in German are really people who are very much into it, and who will really, I know some of them.
Oh no, I mean, that's good to hear, and you can understand. I can believe you, and still there's this weird, because one of the things about, you're probably like this about your work too, the term is control freak. I want to control every single word that's on there, and so it's just tough. The one language that I can read, I read the translation in that language, and it was just so different from anything I meant that I've decided it was just better.
Oh, it was better. It's funny.
To have it be done in languages I didn't know. So,
yeah.
Is that any kind of an answer to the question?
Yeah, sure it is. Yeah. One thing that also very appealed.
I wonder about that too with someone like Borges. I mean, I think even on the channel we ended up kind of posting like one or two different translations of a story, and it's like, yeah, the words can, like, they kind of can basically mean the same thing, but especially with someone like Borges, where every word is so critical and meaningful, like, it could totally, like, using this word instead of this word could add a whole new set of like ambiguities that otherwise weren't there. And like, I'm trying to remember, but like, there was one that was like, I think the word was like sepulture, which is like a grave, almost like a tomb, whereas I think the word in another translation was like this, like, cave like thing. It's like, sepulture and like cave like niche, whatever, I forget exactly what the word was. Very different overtones and meanings and stuff like that, and you can just imagine how that kind of stuff just multiplies infinitely as you're going through a story, especially with someone like I said, Borges, or even someone like Kafka too, where the words here really matter. I think I did a podcast once with the homie Elliot, and I think they read a different translation than me, and we were talking about it throughout, and it's like, okay, yeah, that's interesting, because if it's this way, then I would say this, and if it's this way, I would say that. So and then also something like the Odyssey and the Iliad and whatnot, or even just like Plato, So I think my best approach to that, and I don't know that I've necessarily followed it, but if I think what I'm going to do, like for instance, the next time my next go around for the Odyssey, new translation each time, and I feel like you can kind of get the average and hopefully just get the intuit the overall meaning. But yeah, no, translations in literature is a fascinating topic. And yeah, you can't, I think at the end of the day, one thing that's undeniable is no matter how good the translation is, something is always lost in translation. Something. Even if it's just the overall cadence, word flow. But yeah, let alone, actual words, like specific, there's never a one-to-one meaning between words in different languages. You can get pretty close, but even again, just the cadence, and especially if you get to something like grammar, like when you read translated Japanese literature, I don't know exactly, but I'm pretty sure Japan has like a totally fundamental grammar and logic to it. than something like English. So, because I know some of the other languages, like the Romance languages, are all kind of roughly the same. They share similarities at least. They say if you learn like Spanish, you're halfway to learning something like French, something like that. But like Chinese or Japanese. Those like are just down to like I said, the logic of the grammar. You have to be missing something. So when I read someone like Soseki, I wonder how much of that how much is being lost. And I guess the goal of the translator is to close that gap as much as possible. Although on the other hand, I know some translators find their value in part of what they do is to take liberties. Like sometimes a literal translation genuinely is not the best thing to do here, and so what they'll do is they'll kind of fudge it a little bit to try and match the overall, for lack of a better word, vibe of the meaning. So I think that's I think I swear I read that maybe in my introduction for the Odyssey. Or was it like the Richard? Oh shit! Hold on, sorry, I'm adjusting my computer. There, that's better. What is it? Richard and something Polevsky. It doesn't matter, but like that is a thing. Trying to capture the overall. Sometimes a literal translation, what I'm trying to say, is actually not the best thing to do, especially in terms of something like an idiom or some kind of metaphorical, figurative language. Cool. This is why I find that religious and important texts can be very dubious, as some of those original languages hardly exist anymore. To then analyze something from, say, Sanskrit to the word is almost a non-starter. Yeah, I'd prefer a vibe translation over a literal translation. Yes, I agree. I mean, you're talking about religious text. I mean, even the Bible. I'm assuming this is true, and if not, this is a good enough example. But East of Eden, and it's not really a spoiler. But Lee ends up going on this whole saga of trying to basically go back to the original roots, the language in which the Bible was written. And there's this whole, I think, amazing philosophical development. I forget exactly what it was, but the difference between thou can or thou will and thou mayest, right? That difference from thou can to thou mayest was just this world, right? It implied the capacity of free will and human individuality and freedom and all this. There's a whole I'll save that for people who have either read it or are going to read it. You should experience that on your own. But the point being, you mentioned cool religious texts, right? And this in this case had to do with the Bible, and then you can just imagine just in everyday life here, right? Reading something, like Sanskrit was the Bhagavad Gita written in Sanskrit? I don't know. Don't hold me to. I might have just made myself sound stupid. But yeah, that kind of stuff is it's so fundamental. And again, when you go down to the precision of the words is oftentimes that's like the number one thing authors will talk about. Is like how they will spend hours racking their brain to find that exact precise word that perfectly captures what they're trying to say. And in the translation you just lose that. And I think about this too with in Greek with the words like logos or virtue and stuff like that. They had totally different meanings. I mean, when I was going down my rabbit hole of what translation of the Republic do I get, there's all these comments on the reviews and stuff where it's oftentimes Republic is even just down to the Republic. People will say oftentimes it's actually more the state or the polity or all these different versions, and it's like, man, if we can't even agree on something like the wording of the Republic, when we talk about all these deeper ideas with logos and virtue and morality and knowledge and techne, that's another big one that I remember in my footnotes. They were like, we kind of can't describe this. The best thing is a doctor doing doctor things is that's techne, or a ship navigator navigating a ship, right? The degree to which whatever it is you're supposed to be doing, you do. As I recall, that was kind of the definition of techne, but it wasn't precise, right? So, Gita is Sanskrit. Okay, let's click this YouTube link.
Imagine the reading possibilities that would open up to you
that's
if
funny.
You could read books in more than one language.
Yeah, no.
Well, that's exactly the life that
The active mind was good.
And PhD of literature Max Lawton is living, because he speaks
Oh,
seven
nice.
different.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to. Yeah, we can go down this later. But I've honestly, I mean, I've thought about that. It's not uncommon. I mean, well, yes, it is obviously. But like, I know Joseph Campbell, for instance, he was so impressed by, I think it was War and Peace, that he started learning Russian so that he could, so he could just better understand that. And like someone like Tolstoy, I think is such, because I think the writing is already so brilliant, fantastic, smooth, and it's just like, man, I'm reading you're telling me this is like the distorted version of it. It's just it's crazy. And I do even remember specifically in War and Peace there being phrases and words that just didn't have you just can't explain it. So anyway, to his point, I could see why, as a writer, especially with someone with such a distinctive writing style as David Foster Wallace, I could see why you'd be on edge with just like, Lord knows how this sounds in German. Imagine, I haven't read Infinite Jest, but I know it's a huge tome, and assuming it's like everything else that I have read by David Foster Wallace, if anything, it seems like his style on steroids. You can just imagine, like, who knows what that would be like in a whole other language. So I feel I'm on that.
Very much appealed to me is when you spoke in an interview about the existential loneliness, of the yeah.
I said the word existential loneliness.
Something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe I'm German and I sometimes get things wrong, but
No. Okay.
Well, what I do like about this interview too, in some ways, is like, it is a little more conversational. Like, sometimes she'll ask a question and he just kind of cuts past it, and I'm not saying he's doing that right now necessarily, but what's cool about this is it is somewhat more conversational, and there are some like hiccups, but it's not just like, sterile. Question 1, here's your answer. Okay, question. They're dynamic. They're responding to each other. I think that's probably what makes an interview good, just as a general rule.
And that's something, I very much like to hear an author say, because that's the one thing I'm searching in the things I read. I'm searching for this testimonies of existential loneliness. So, is that something you still relate to, or?
Well, yeah. If I understand your question, this is the stuff that we were talking about.
This is a good topic point. I just see you commented. So I'm trying to imagine if any of my writing were to be reworded, let alone translated. Yeah, it would change so much, but I feel that there are definitely really effective translations despite the warping. Yeah, of course. I mean, could you imagine life without translated literature? It'd be so narrowing. Like, it's obviously something we have to do. And of course, like, if I had writing, I would want it to be I would want it to reach as many people as possible. It's just like, there's the tension between that aspect, like letting just, making this accessible to as many different minds and languages and cultures as possible. Imagine if David Foster Wallace was only relegated to just, English speaking countries. I feel like that'd be a major loss. Or, of course, like, look at all these books on my shelf. We were just talking about the Bhagavad Gita and, like the Upanishads, Leo Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, the Odyssey, Homer. There's, what's his name? Goethe, Nietzsche. There's so many people that, like, it would be a true profound loss if we couldn't translate literature. But there's always just a little asterisk with it.
About 2 questions ago, there's something painful about being stuck in a body and a consciousness that can't ever
it's a good plan,
except through sort of conversation, can't ever be inside anybody else's. And there's a magic about except, see, I don't know that much about music. People who do say that there is a purity with which the composer's emotional state can be felt by the listener that can't be approached by anything else either. There's probably most kinds of art have this sort of magical thing of, for a moment, there's a kind of reconciliation and communion between you and me and you and me that isn't possible in any other way. But it's also the sort of thing...
I mean, I agree. I love that. Like, one of the distinctive things about art being, you have that moment where there is... that's a great word for it, the communion with the artist. Like, I don't know, and perhaps it sounds corny, but when I read these types of books, like, just to take someone like Tolstoy, like, he's writing about things, or like, I talk about him all the time, Cicero or Montaigne. It's like, there are these people that are, the right Seneca, people who have been writing hundreds, thousands of years ago, and yet in that moment when you're reading the book, you are, despite that massive difference in culture and of course with language and of course time, there's still that moment where there's just like a certain resonance, right? There's a harmony in your soul and the author's soul. Again, extremely corny, but I think that ultimately is, I think that's kind of like what he's talking about. And that's one of the beauties of art. And with something like music, I think that's a great example. When a composer makes just a brilliant piece of music there, and it elicits that same feeling in you, or at least a feeling, and something similar. I mean, it's never going to be exact, I guess, and everyone's going to have different reactions to that kind of stuff. But just some almost moment of that the feeling of the sublime, the transcendent. I think that to me is like the beauty of art, and the fact that it's able to just make all these resonances throughout time, the waves of time. How many people have picked up the Odyssey or Tolstoy or something like that and had that same moment? Or if I knew music equivalents, which I kind of don't, but I know there's a bunch of music that I do listen to, like some classical stuff that man, that stuff really I do have, there's no other way for me to explain it really than sublime. And it's just that's the beauty of art, is you can create it and it sends these ripples throughout time, in space, really. That's, again, we're bordering on corny cringe status, but it is so true, that just can resonate and just multiply, and just it's beautiful. And I think that's what in some part that's what he's talking about here. Bard Sonic, you said it there, transcendence, a work greater than the self. I like your elaboration, because I always use transcendence as that's something, that's a word that comes to mind for me. But I like what you said, a work greater than the self. And what is it? Carl Jung has a quote where it's basically when you read good art, or just experience good art, it's not just it doesn't have to do with just yourself. It has to do with all of mankind. And I think the best art, of all different forms, is the type of stuff that touches on the fundamental themes of human experience. It's almost like a Joseph Campbell idea, the stories of mythology and religion and literature that stands the test of time. They're transcendent because you transcend the self, right? It's greater than the self, like you said, Bard Sonic, in the sense that it's something that everybody as a collective experiences. And I think when somebody East of Eden, John Steinbeck, that's just another good example that comes to mind for me. These are things that when you read them, and they are able to describe so perfectly certain things that everybody throughout, again, time immemorial has experienced. There's just something beautiful about that. I can't even articulate. I can't give you a rational reason, really, aside from what we just talked about. But the fact of the matter is, there is just something fundamentally beautiful when those moments hit, right? When the literature is hitting and the chord strikes within your soul, and there's just that harmony, and you're reading and you just feel elated. That, I think, is that's at least what I mean when I talk about the sublime and the transcendence of art. Stuff exactly like you say, it's greater than the self. It's tapping into some much deeper source. And I think that's the beauty of art, and that's ultimately what makes for good art. This is why I don't really like. I think why I don't like a lot of contemporary literature is because they're talking about I've read some just corny ass books where, and I've mentioned some on the channel and everything, but it's just things that are dated in a way. And again, some people like this. It's immersive. It's relatable. But when you're talking about I remember the Book of Form and Emptiness. I remember the end of that book, just totally, it was just it was talking about Twitter and Trump and crap, and it's that's the stuff that's not transcendent to me. That's the kind of stuff that will not make sense 100 years from now. It's not tapping into any deeper source. It's very superficial. It's about current events. Schopenhauer says that that history or politics, everyday news, is the second hand of history, right? Of a clock. And he also compares it to newspaper blowing in the wind. Their opinions go back and forth and back and forth. It's not substantive. It's not something enduring, and that's not always true. Of course, good contemporary literature can obviously do that. But I think that's the point is. What I'm saying is, I think the degree to which a piece of art can tap into that enduring, deeper aspect of ourselves, that's what makes good art to me. Of course, easier said than done, and that takes a million different forms, but that's always what I kind of come back to.
it's so weighty and so general that, especially after he used the word pontificate, I
What does
feel
it mean? I have never heard it.
the word pontificate, to speak pompously about very, very complex, abstruse
AKA to yap.
matters. It's a little bit pejorative, but he meant it in a funny way. But it's, and this is something else about like being an American. When I hear the word existential now, I like half of me rolls my eyes. Oh, what a bit, the big sexy like philosophical term, and it becomes hard to speak seriously about it because all I can hear is being made fun of for how serious and boring and dull I'm being. If that makes any sense. Good luck editing.
Ernst?
Yeah, your German accent's much better than mine. How surprising.
Yeah, really.
Speed.
This is raw. This is a raw ass,
And
But it's
then
cool. It's
When
cool.
I'm talking about my generation, and
My hope. Okay, damn, video guy, what you doing, bro?
yeah, people in my profession.
God damn, they doing my
most
man
of the
dirty,
times
bro.
they have-
What the fuck? Sound guy. Yeah. Why is this dude? Yeah, exactly. He the type. Boring. He's scrolling on his phone as he speak. But what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, I'm hoping that there's like a turn from just you become so saturated with like the clickbait, hyper distracting, just one thing, train like a unending barrage of just content, the kind of world we live in. I'm hoping there's a push towards kind of stuff like this where it's just raw, it's just it's just real. It's no cuts, it's no, I mean, I know this is like the unedited interview, so this is not what came out of it at all, but just I don't know, it'd be cool to see a turn more towards this kind of stuff.
Pretty good educations and all this.
But camera guy said,
But there's also the feeling not being able to do anything with it. You have pretty good conditions to start with, and then after a while you think, well, yeah, what's next, and what am I doing with this? You have this.
See, and I like their dynamic, but I do feel like he's working. He's doing good work with, I think, the questions. Like, what is this? If this was posed to me, I would be like, I would fumble the bag fast.
Feeling, maybe it's not reality, but you have the feeling of not doing anything with your life. What do you think about that?
See, me.
I know that there's a
Like, what? What's the question? The overall a little shoddy. We got the sound guy fumbling. We got the camera guy, and then the interview. I mean, she's not bad. I think, and it's real. I like that it's she's not sterile. It seems like she's actually engaging in a conversation. But yeah, that's a tough question.
I know that there's a paradox in the U.S. of the people who get powerful jobs tend to go to really good schools, and often in school you study the liberal arts, which is philosophy and classical stuff and languages, and it's all very much about the nobility of the human spirit and broadening the mind. And then from that you go to a specialized school to learn how to sue people or to figure out how to write copy that will make people buy a certain kind of SUV. And yeah, I mean, it's I don't know what I think about it other than that.
You can see the gears working.
I'm not sure really that it's ever been all that different, because very few of us, and there are things about my job I don't like, but this is one of them that I do like, is that I get to use pretty much everything I've ever learned or think about, and it's actually something that goes.
I gotta turn a little. 1 sec. I did want to say something before he, unless he might come back to it, but you go to a university, a liberal arts university, and learn about all this lofty stuff just to turn around and learn how to best sue people and advertise and stuff like that. And I do think the original university systems have been, totally bastardized, where, this is actually a thing I really fucking hate. And I've been taking like the history of mathematics, and it's just like the original days of like ancient Greece. That's arguably when the first universities, schools. That's what, like, philosophers would have schools where basically they would lecture and people would get paid some nominal fee to come in and listen to them. And it used to be about education, truly about education. At least, and the way that it's genuine, the way that it was originated, the intention was behind them. But now universities have just totally devolved. Like when you ask why someone goes to school, it's to make money, it's to get a degree so they can get a job, and it's just like it's just sad to see how far the university system has fallen. Where it's just like, and okay, to be fair, I'm sure back in the day and the origin of like original universities, this was a thing too. I always come back. It's nothing new under the sun. I'm sure there were people that did this just so that they could go turn around and earn their jobs too. But it does seem like now the university system has just become a mill for people to come, and they just churn out students, and they charge us fucking thousands of dollars to, like when you take the, your gen eds and the upper division classes, like the gen eds, the whole point is you have to take a wide range of stuff. Like, if you do a Bachelor of Arts, you're taking languages, you're taking like some kind of literature proficiency, you're taking, all this whole wide survey of topics. And, oftentimes it involves something like ethics or philosophy, and the idea was because you're supposed to get like a general and a genuine education and stuff. But now it's like, one, again, totally bastardized, and people just don't give a fuck. But it's also like the sentiment too is like, why do I have to take this class? Like the amount of like scientist, mathematician, science, logic bros, it's like, why do I need to take ethics is just astounding. And also like, why do I need to take English? I'm not gonna write. I'm gonna, I do science. I do math. I don't need to write. It's like just baffling to me. Meanwhile, I graded some of these mofos' papers, and they're god fucking awful. And if you don't take ethics, if you don't take philosophy, you end up getting just horrible amounts of like some kind of like Neuralink stuff. And I'm a little torn about that because they have a lot of good stuff too. But like just the idea, obviously, like the very powerful technology, social media, to name another one, that are in the like if you don't have any kind of philosophical foundation, then it's all for it can go in very dark places, as we are already seeing. But just the idea of the university system, like he says, they go and enter this program where they should be learning about like philosophy and all these high ideals, and they turn around and figure out how to best sue someone. It's just a total distortion of the original, how the academy, right, like the academy in schools and universities, how they originally, the intent behind them. The Academy Sophia, love of wisdom. Yeah, exactly. Is that what Sophia means? I feel like I heard something about the word Sophia meaning that. Let me know if that's true. Is education the commodification of commodification? I'm gonna say yes. That sounds right. I'm gonna say yes. It's definitely well. Okay, maybe I'll even say it's like the commodification of knowledge. You know what I mean? It's like this is something that should be done as an intrinsic good. Like it's just in our blood. It's just in, I would like to hope. But, people like to learn. And, especially, I think a lot of times, I think what happens is the education system fails people and they never get hooked like they really ought to. Or they just, it becomes so much like, drudgery and grunt work that it just sucks all the fun out of it. But, of course, obviously, one of the things it means to be human is to have some kind of aspiration just for knowledge. And for knowledge's sake, like I against all reason, I'm going back to school because I'm, genuinely interested in math, right? It makes no sense for me to do it, but like the idea is that we do have this intrinsic desire to learn, but what happens is something like education, it commodifies it in that way that it's like, okay, now it's not about learning. Actually, education and knowledge is a means to an end now. And then you can chop it up even further. It's like, okay, I'm getting lectured and stuff, or like, the teachers now adjust their lectures to based on the fact that there's going to be a quiz. There's going to be the way we're testing. Like, okay, one, we're testing your knowledge in the first place. That already just totally kind of changes the dynamic. And that's good. Like, obviously you should test, like, you know, when I take a midterm or a final, that's where I'd be really going back in my material and really learning. Like, so I'm not against any of this stuff necessarily, but you understand what I'm saying, right? Like, and we were talking about this with the Jared Henderson video, where it's like, you know, your knowledge, your metric for actually having learned something becomes reduced to, like, you know, this totally artificial way of measuring it. And then at that point, now it's just, and you're doing, you know, people will take totally different studying methods so that they can learn to perform better on a test rather than to actually genuinely learn. And then this, you know, just goes all the way down to, like, I'm trying to get the highest grade in the class, and I'm trying to take, you know, X amount of classes so that I get a degree, so that ultimately I can go and work and make money. That's the name of the game, which is just a far cry from going to, like, could you imagine universities if they were free, if you didn't have to worry about, like, what profession is going to make me money, rather which profession is it that I genuinely am most interested in, and you have teachers that, rather than focusing on grades and stuff like this, actually taught in order for students to, you know, genuinely learn. Could you imagine if the university was structured like that? It would look totally different, but it would also, you know, I think bring out this kind of stuff in a lot of people that it's like latent in there. You know, I think a lot of people are latent students. They just have, for whatever reason, like we've been talking about, just end up just really loathing school, or at the very least being totally uninterested in it. And that's just sad. I mean, it's really sad. So, cool, Cole, coming back to your comment, I'm going to say that education is the commodification of knowledge. And you went on to say, it's like Schopenhauer's quotes on books: you shouldn't confuse taking a class with the integration of its teaching. Yes, absolutely. The Marxists largely to blame. Why? Bartonic, money and power, perhaps a way to bastardize it. At first you make money to learn, now you learn to make money. Students turning in AI essays that are graded by AI teaching schools, completely impersonal transaction. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I'm interested, Bartonic, because for me, when I think about why this is the case, capitalism is actually what comes to mind. You know, because it's all about money. Really, like, you know, when people talk about why they chose such and such a degree, why, I mean, even like down to the universe. And I'm not saying, I'm sure there could be critiques of Marxism with this too, for sure. And I'm not even sure of the distinctions, but just talking here, it's like the universities to me, when I was in it, you know, when I was in that kind of stuff deep, they, you know, their goal is to just take on as many students as possible. So now you have like enormous classrooms, and like they are trying to make it as streamlined, right? Like this AI essays, AI teaching tools, that kind of stuff, and like make it as like basically as impersonal as possible, as factory like, as, you know, how can we just churn students in, get them out, and like I'll probably, I don't know if I've told this before or if I will, I'm sure I'll do it again, but like, you know, when I was grading essays and stuff and just grades in a class in general, we were literally told to essentially like grade on a distribution. So it's like, it's not like if I'm grading essays, it's not like on an absolute standard, if that makes sense. Like basically we have to make sure that X amount of people get A's, X amount of people get B's, X amount of people get C's. There's some wiggle room, but like that's like literally a requirement, is there has to be some kind of like overall distribution. So that allows for just each new coming cohort, they can just get stupid. Like this literally happened. I'm reading an essay, it's dog shit, I give it a C or something like that, right? And I come back and I keep reading essays, and it's like, oh my god, they get worse. They get so much worse. And this essay that I thought was a C now is like a B plus or so, because it, you know, we're literally instructed to do it that way. And so just worse and worse shit is able to pass, I think, these days. And especially once you get into like the AI stuff, you know, that's going to be, Lord knows. You know, now you just have people spending thousands of dollars because again, that's a great example. People don't actually care about learning. They're there to get the degree. I mean, I'm making generalizations here, of course. But like, I think there are people who have no problem spending thousands on tuition to, in turn, use AI. I used to do this shit. I used to cheat. I used to do that all the time. Spark Notes, used to not read, just Quizlet for like my bio classes and stuff like this. I've since become a better student, and I was still always with it a little bit. That was more just like when I had to make ends meet, I'll be cheating a little bit. But like the idea that you would go into this institution which is dedicated to all this stuff, and then use AI to answer all your questions for you, and just coast like that as much as you can through the degree, and then you get handed this piece of paper which now lets you go. All of this to me is very much in terms of like maximizing profit for the university, and maybe related to the Marx stuff. I don't know if it's like for or against or whatever, but they're trying to make schools almost like a factory, like make this like a well-oiled machine where it's just a money machine. Just bring them all in, crank them out as most efficiently, as with as little effort as possible, to just milk out more money, get them in, get them gone, and move on to the next one, rather than any kind of focus on real education. Cool. Yeah, I thought the prevailing idea for why school sucks is that it is modeled after teaching factory workers, and people are essentially objectified as machines. Which, tying this back to the David Foster Wallace essay, in a way, it almost seems like there's something similar going on with the corporate publishing, right? Where it's like they're treating authors and writers as factory workers in a certain way, right? Objectified. You're gonna go on such and such a tour because it's free advertising. How do these bad essays read? I'm curious. How do they write? Horrible. Like, just, I mean, you get a breath of fresh air every once in a while with a student who writes like a decent essay. But just, I mean, for one, typos. Two, there's no order and coherence to it at all. It's just bull. You can tell they are bullshitting. Like, you can just see they're saying words, not saying anything. Like, poor grammar, like, run-on sentences, and just like totally like not cite, or like you have like some kind of rubric that talks about all these different things, and they just fucking fail on all measures. It's bad. Not good. Okay, I'm gonna play the rest of the video.
A long way when I bitch and moan about, sometimes it's lonely work, and sometimes, you worry that it's not very good. I know that there is, at least in America, an entire class of, and now I'm talking about a very specific class here. I'm talking about upper and upper middle class kids whose parents could afford to send them to very good schools where they got very good educations, who are often working in jobs that are financially rewarding, but don't have anything to do with what they got taught, persuasively taught, was important and worthwhile.
I won't pause it because we've been talking about it, but that's
I've
just
never really quite thought of
facts.
it in those
Icing on the
stark terms.
cake.
That's a bit of a paradox, isn't it? When you guys talk about it, what do you conclude from it?
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't know really what to conclude from it, But it's I don't know if this is a phenomenon which is has to do with a certain generation, or is it?
Say a friend of yours your age who you were in school with who's a businessman now would say that you are better off than he, because you're at least getting to use a lot of the stuff that you studied in your actual work, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes and no, because I've been seeing the business people, the high STEM people. They look down on you heavily. They look down on you heavily if you do something like English. It's like you can just see them scoffing in their heads. Had that experience a lot. Or just like adults. That's another fucking thing. Like, I say adults because I was like, when I was in college. It's like, what are you going to school for? English. What are you doing that for? What do you plan on doing? What do you plan on doing with that? What kind of job are you going to get with that? Invariably, that's what everybody said. It's never like, oh, that's awesome. You're reading like, the Western canon. You're reading some of the greatest texts in history. It's always like, well, what the hell are you doing that for? Like, that's it. English, I feel like, is a classic, like, the quote unquote useless degree. It's like, it's just like, what could you possibly gain from that? And that's because people think about it in terms of, like, making money. Like, from the perspective of making money, you could not pick a worse degree than English. But like, if you're actually trying to get fulfillment and you're interested in that subject and all this, then of course it's a no-brainer too. I found my English degree to be absolutely rewarding. That's one of the things I take with me most to this day, of course. But like, every time someone asks, I used to hate having conversations with like adults about college and stuff like that, because I just knew that's where they were going. Like, why? It's like, what? I remember like my ex's stepdad, like, I remember just like being like, just seeing his face, like, so yeah, what do you plan on doing with that degree, kiddo? You know what I mean? And I get, I get it, because from that perspective, it's a horrible idea. But of course, like, there are more perspectives that to learning than just making money. Of course. Cool quote. They look down on you, but a good percent of the time, it's because they're upset that you are not denying yourself like they did. It can be a covert envy. Yeah, that's interesting. Otherwise, it's just social conditioning to not value high earning work. I think it's a little bit of both. Because you know what I do, the reason I took English was because, like, I made a funny enough, the bitter irony of this is I was torn. I was gonna do business. Literally, I was gonna, the fucking hilarious part. I don't think I would have lasted. I probably would have switched, because that would be just destroy me. But yeah, I was thinking about doing that, because I'm like, okay, this is like a good conventional degree. I'll make money, stuff like that. But I went with English because it was like, you know what, basically on some follow your heart shit. Or better yet, here, I'll make it less cliche. Instead of follow your heart, follow your bliss, which comes from Joseph Campbell. Which is, honestly, I just think that is it's very simple maxim, but it's just, I think, a fantastic way, sort of North Star to live your life. Follow your bliss. Follow what makes you happy, what brings you to that sublime kind of state. Sorry, there's a plane flying. I don't know if you guys can hear this, but yeah. So I did that because it's like, you know what, I want to do this, and two, I was and still am into creative writing. And I was like, I can just tell. I can see, if I can see the future. If I get into business, I'm gonna stop reading. And I'm certainly gonna stop writing. And whereas if I did something like English, I'm gonna be forced to do all that stuff. I'm gonna be forced to read the books. It is way more in line with what I actually want to do. Of course, the big question looming over me, or the big hesitation, was, it's kind of facts. What the hell are you gonna do with an English degree? I mean, there's plenty of stuff you can do with an English degree still, but I did that. I made that choice completely in flouting the conventional, what would have been the smart thing to do, but rather to pursue what I genuinely wanted to learn. And for me, that was absolutely imagine me doing business, bro. Like, would I be doing the book reviews? Would I have these shelves? Would I be writing if I didn't do my English degree? I don't know. A little part of me likes to think I'd always have that seed within me, but it wouldn't be as developed. It wouldn't have been as rigorous as, if I actually did the degree. So yeah, I don't know. A covert envy, that's an interesting idea. Cool. That some people might look down on that stuff because it's secretly what they wanted to do, but just didn't have the guts in some sense to actually. That makes it sound kind of highfalutin, but I understand what you're saying. Are you considering becoming a teacher and educator? No. I hate grading. That's low-key why I dropped out of my PhD program. When I grade people, I want to bash my fucking... Maybe math, because you just like, it's either right or wrong and stuff, but I don't know what it is. The administrativeness, the tediousness of grading, I can't do it. I love teaching. Like, when I taught at prisons, for instance... That's cool. There's no homework, or if it is homework, it's cool because it's like creative writing, and I'm just reading their poetry and shit. It's not like I'm grading them. But see, that's even more to the point. Like, we talk about the university stuff, and it's like, me personally, the whole, there's a rubric. They get 5 points if they include X, Y, Z. They get 4 points if they include X, 3 points, and then there's 5 subsections, and blah, blah, blah. And then, for one, these essays are fucking terrible, I'm telling you. It is mind-numbing, excruciating work. And I think I'm really, really averse to that kind of stuff. But as for the actual act of teach, if I could just lecture and go home, I would love to teach. But no, that's not in the plans. I like to think Big Nate's book reviews is a little bit of something like that. Like, it's a little bit of, the culture. We be teaching, we be breaking down, analyzing texts, in some sense. But I have been thinking about tutoring, though, lately. You'd be a fantastic professor. Yeah, thanks. If I have a TA grader, I'll do it. But... But look, I'm gonna be the professor online. I'm gonna be the Big Nate's book reviews professor. For now, we'll see where it goes. But all right, let's get into it.
You know what? We could talk about it for a long time. I don't know that I could say anything about it that would be interesting on camera or from an on-camera point of view. My suspicion is that this has got something to do with something that was explained by original sin in Genesis, which is that...
Oh, he bringing out original sin.
Part as we get older, we have to do things to get money to stay alive, and that there are things about that often feel very wrong to us.
I mean, it makes perfect sense because we're obviously riffing off of what David Foster Wallace says. But if that's not, that's exactly what we just talked about. And he's talking about original sin because now, once Adam and Eve did the deed and they ate the apple, the thing is now you have to toil for bread, right? Now you don't like. I don't think it explicitly ever said whether they the logistics of how they ate food or if they even needed to eat. But I know part of the original sin is like now you have to work. Right, you have to make a living of some kind. Obviously back then it was to farm and toil the fields and care for the home and everything like that. And we just have a very different version of it today. But that idea of you have to work to live, and that's what's so insidious about it, and that's what sucks, especially in such a capitalist society. I mean, it's going to be a problem everywhere. It's going to be a problem in any kind of governance. That's a fundamental problem of life. But I think it's just amplified, at least a lot of the stuff we're talking about, where it's just like where everybody, your whole society is structured around making money. And again, yeah, you have to work to live. And like a lot of us, I mean, this is why teachers do what they do for so little pay. It's because a lot of times what we try and do is just our best to align it as much as we can. The things we like to do with the stuff that actually pays. And you try and match those up as close as you can, and there's lots of shades therein, but yeah, it is a fucking L.
Which is probably really sad.
Was DFW a
It would be
teacher?
very nice if you cut that out because that just sounds weird.
I guess he taught creative writing. That makes sense.
I don't know. Yeah, I get.
I'd like to be a writer. I'd be working on I haven't shared it with any of you guys, but I have some years long project, and it's starting to really take shape. I'm struggling between I want to completely quit work and do the writing full time, but if you're asking me what I want to do, write.
Part of it, I mean,
Bro's going through it.
But there also are people who are,
Bro, see, I love this though. It's like bro's just is sweaty we're in a hotel room. It's gritty. It's raw. I like it.
Up and they just feel somehow alienated from.
I liked the shot where it kind of showed the full body. I like that better than what this is, to be honest.
I mean,
we're not talking a Marxist kind of alienate. We're not talking about
Marx is mentioned.
alienation
Marx
from the
mentioned.
means of production.
Marx mentioned.
Yeah, there is. See, the thing of it is, though, at least in the U.S., this would be my guess, is that I doubt that somebody who went only to high school, which is the secondary kind of school, and is working in a factory, feels any. I doubt he wakes up and go, well, by gosh, at least I don't have all this humanistic learning that I'm not using. Yeah, I don't imagine he's any more satisfied or nourished inside by his job either. What you and I are part of is a class and generation that can be very articulate about what our complaints are and what we're feeling uneasy about. And I think if there's something that characterizes our generation is not that we've come up with new problems or brilliant new solutions to them, but that we're endlessly verbal about it, and which is probably a start, at least being willing to talk about it. But
The first step to recovery is admitting you have a problem.
yeah, so
we started out talking about all this dilemma with wanting to be entertained, and you just mentioned that there was this big vote in America a couple of days ago, and this movement into a certain.
I'm gonna turn
you asked me what I thought it was.
a little bit up because I'm it's 8:30 and I haven't had dinner, but we're so close. Should we save the last 10 minutes? Ooh, it's already 8:30. Okay, guys, I'm sorry. Let's save the last 10 minutes because the way we be yapping, we're. I think that's what happened for the second stream. I think we didn't get past 15 minutes and it was a whole hour. And then if we're short on the next one, we can just pick it up where we left off. I know it's fun. It's I think it's gonna be a four-parter. But here, let me we'll leave it here. We'll leave it here because I want to give it its due diligence and And again, if we finish the interview early, I mean, I think we can do work with 10 minutes. And if we finish early, then we'll just move on to another David Foster Wallace interview. No, I'm just playing. We'll switch it up. But anyway, thank you guys for joining. As usual, some illuminating conversation. I always feel like, get a lot of stuff out of this. You never know where it's going, but once we start riffing, I love the commentary from you guys too. Even with just like, two people in here, I feel like we can really get we get some ideas going. So love all your comments, love all the participation. And so next week, okay, two things. I'm gonna change I'm changing the official time to 6 p.m. Mountain Time. So I think that should be better for everybody, especially if you're on the East Coast. I think it'll be like an hour earlier. But we're going to try out 6 p.m. Mountain Time from here on out. And then for the next text, I'm trying to do every other. So for the next text, I'm thinking it's an essay called The Unconscious by Sigmund Freud. Get back into our psychoanalysis. I have found that in literature, the more and more I, dig into the psychoanalysis stuff, it's very enriching stuff. And I don't think it gets enough attention. And psychoanalysis has been the whole idea has been very transformative for me. Blah blah blah. I don't need to justify it. Next fucking week, we'll be reading The Unconscious by Sigmund Freud, which I think outlines a lot of his key ideas in his sort of theory of the mind. So I'll post that in the Discord. Like I said, we'll try and move to 6 p.m. Mountain Time from here on out. I think that's what Colorado is, Mountain Time. I'll put updates in the Discord. But yeah, that's it, folks. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And until the next time, my friends. So, all right, Big Nate Gang, at ease, salute. Thank you guys for tuning in to the Big Nate's live stream, home of the best live streams.